Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A big welcome to all for joining us at our Singapore Sustainability Academy, or SSA for short, this afternoon. The event will focus on food, a topic that is close to the heart of everyone. We have lined up a few passionate speakers to share their enriching journeys on growing edible greens. They include Bjorn Low, Executive Director and co-founder of Edible Garden City, who will be dialing in virtually, Matthew Howe, founder of GrowBricks, Charlotte May, nutritionist and presenter at the Charlotte May, Jack Yam, the Midnight Gardener, and Sharon Tay, Community and Bloom Ambassador at National Parks Board. They will share their innovative thoughts and experiences on the topic growing edible greens everywhere for everyone, a timely subject as Singapore tries to meet its 30 by 30 goal of producing 30% of its nutritional needs by 2030. This exciting initiative is an extension of CDL's advocacy of sustainability in support of global goals such as SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, 12, Responsible Consumption and Disposal, and SDG 13, Climate Action. Let's start the program with a short welcome by Ms. Esther An, CDL's Chief Sustainability Officer and the founder of Women for Green Network.
Yeah, the mysterious voice is from there, Marilyn. Yeah. Okay, well, I know that some of you are first time here, right? Anyone first time here? Okay, so allow me to do a little bit of background. So this is called the Singapore Sustainability Academy. It was actually initiated and built by CDL, and but in partnership with 15 industry partners and supported by 6 government agencies. So it's a really ground up and partnership with the government's support. So it was opened in June 2017, and it supports SDG, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and of course green buildings, sustainable energy. What you see here, half of the space, we gave it to the NGO called Sustainable Energy Association Singapore, and as their office and also a classroom behind. So we don't charge any money for any NGOs to come and use this space to promote anything about sustainable development, climate action, and all. And this is a truly Green Mark Platinum building and also net zero building. And what you see here, there are 2 bars. The top is actually what is the solar energy we produce, we generated through using our solar panels on the rooftop. And the blue bar is how much we have used, real-time tracking. So you can see that we are generating more than we use, and this is a truly a net zero energy building. Whatever excess is also channeled back to the mall. Nothing go to waste. And more than 80% of the material used here, the cross-laminated timber, are all certified by Nature Barcode from the most sustainable forests. So today we're very happy to be here to talk about food, right? Do you know that how much food we consume in Singapore, each one of us? Okay, it's quite scary, huh? 390 pieces eggs, huh? Okay, this is one person, an average of all these. Okay, you can take picture of it. Vegetable, 100 kilo, right? We all don't know, right? And but recently we know that we couldn't find chicken on the supermarket shelf and all that, right? So are we very secure in terms of food supply? And do you know how much we actually produce in Singapore locally? The next slide will be showing you some data that we should be concerned. And that's also the reason why we hold this event. We actually want to encourage that we should all grow edible garden everywhere, whether at home, your corridor, or your own home garden and all, or even in office space. So because Singapore only produces 10% of our own food, it's quite scary, right? If any disruption, like during COVID, there's no shipment and all that, how can we get 90% of food coming to feed all Singaporean? So I think this is something that I want to just set the scene. I'm not expert or business, but I have a whole panel of all these experts to inspire us. So just now, Marilyn already introduced our panelists, and the next one is actually Bjorn, who is a very well-known, one of the pioneer agri-enterprise, and his business called Edible Garden was also featured by World Economic Forum, and Unfortunately, Bjorn was tested positive the past week, and today he said a faint lie, but I said, no, you better rest at home, you know. So he's going to dial in. He's already online, and I will pass it to Bjorn Low, who is the Executive Director and co-founder of Edible Garden City, to share with us his successful story and how he can actually help to contribute to the 30 by 30 goal set by our government to produce 30% of food needed by Singaporean by 2030. Over to you, Bjorn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Esther, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Really disappointed that I can't join you today in that what seemingly is a very beautiful building at the SSA. But today and this year also marks the 10th year anniversary of Edible Garden City. So it will be my honor to share with you a little bit about our journey on how we got into urban agriculture and urban farming. So just I have some slides to share. So if you bear with me. Okay, so so as I mentioned, 10 years ago, we conceptualized this idea of turning Singapore as a garden city into an edible garden city. And a lot of these inspiration that was given to me was through my time working on small self-sustainable organic farms in a few different continents, and then going into agriculture school and to learn about regenerative agriculture practices. And this was really a experiment on living as self-sustainably as I could. So you can see in this picture, I was living in a yurt in the middle of Wales with no running water, no electricity, with a lamb as a pet. And this kind of gave me insight into food production in a very natural way, and also living in a very light way, touching the earth, and making my own bread, making my own wine, my own cheese, was very, very fulfilling. But when I was in the middle of Wales, going through my internship, I kept thinking about Singapore. And as a nation, whilst we have in the past been quite productive in agriculture, today we have lost quite a bit of that knowledge and expertise. And so I wanted to come back to Singapore to really start to explore what could be done back home. And if you look at the history of agriculture production globally, in the 1970s, 1950s to the 1970s, was a period where there were quite a number of food crises that happened. You had the food price crisis of 1972 to 1974, where food prices really escalated. Grains were in short supply. And you can see government globally setting policies to really industrialize agriculture production. And this is very evident in what Singapore has done. By 1975, we were actually quite productive, and just in response to this global shift and change. But in the 80s, we then suddenly had an oversupply of grains globally, and thus agriculture products and food prices started to drop. And thus a lot of countries then relied on imports. Singapore is no less. We kind of put our energy then into other other GDP growth drivers, and agriculture was relegated to 1% of our land today. And this reliance on imports from 90% of our food from 170 countries started to really allow us to sustain ourselves in this highly volatile world. But today we can see that this strategy can no longer be held strongly due to geopolitical changes, climate change, and also pandemics like COVID. But a lot of times when we think about imports, the over-reliance on imports from, for example, this picture showing a neighboring country, Cameron Highlands, you can see the price, the ecological price and the environmental price that we do not account into our food prices. You see biodiversity loss, you see water table pollution, and you see soil erosion, all on the basis of a very extractive manner of food production to supply the growing demand of our nation state. And food systems have been further exposed with supply chain inefficiency, which the pandemic has done in the last few years. But though Singapore is ranked #1 in Global Food Security Index, studies have shown that 10% of Singaporean households experience some form of food insecurity. And this is from a paper, The Hunger Report, written by the Singapore Management University. But yet we throw away 655,000 tons of food in 2020. So in some sense, there is a stark imbalance in the system, which we hope that through various interventions we'll be able to address. And this was the precursor and the motivation of exploring urban agriculture as one of the solutions to a more equitable food system. And we really designed our social enterprise around 3 core principles of sustainability, environmental impact, and community engagement. And in many sense, taking philosophies and concepts and ideas from global north or the global south, things like designing food forests as a more regenerative and natural way of growing. And in these kind of forest structured designs that we put into the city, we use overarching trees such as fruit trees such as papaya, belimbing, to provide shade for some of the more tender plants like the basil and the chilies. And then the ground covers on the 3rd layer provides a blanket for the soil so that the topsoil gets maintained. And over the last 10 years, we have worked out a good compendium of different plants in the canopy layers, to the shrub layers, to herbaceous and ground cover layers, and vertical layers as well. And you can see that when we start to apply certain principles into how we design these spaces, for example, on the rooftops, in this example at Spectra Secondary School, where we actually naturally fertilize the soil using legumes, so using beans, because beans fix nitrogen from the atmosphere into the root nodules and into the soil. We dig that in as a green manure, and then we plant the main crop. Similarly here at Willock, you can see we apply similar ideas and principles. And once you put certain principles and fundamentals in place, you start to see the spaces transform into very biodiverse and productive spaces. And all of these is possible even on the rooftop with soil profile of 0.5 meters. And through the times, we started to look deeper into spaces. For example, working with SLA to really activate viaduct spaces, using farms to activate viaduct spaces. It was really interesting to see that when we started to put a farm in these very obscure spaces, people were really interested, and they did come to these spaces, even though it was a bit far-flung. And we started to convert more and more rooftops, a lot more purpose-built rooftops as urban farms, as environmental touch points, to spread environmental messaging and grow your own food messaging. For example, this one at Funan. But what we really saw was the value of these spaces and urban farms is its ability to bring people together over a common topic such as food. In this pop-up that we did in Growell Road in Little India, we took 2 underutilized shop houses, and we didn't initially wanted to do indoor farming because of its challenging nature of using a lot of electricity, but we just didn't have any sunlight in the shop house. So indoor farming was the only way to go about it. But what we did though was we went to all the hardware shops around Little India and procured fluorescent lights, simple materials, and built a system out of that in a very fun and educational way, and started to grow a lot of microgreens and microherbs within the setting. But what happened was that the community came together and used that space as a basis of talking about food sustainability and the future of the food system. And this element of community and people has been very core to the work that we have done over the last 10 years. Every garden and every farm we built has a community engagement element. And this is because we found that it's a very stark disconnect between urbanites, nature, and agriculture. People want to learn and want to find out, but there are not enough spaces for them to do so. And we use these techniques and these design methods and put them in schools, engaging kids, to go off their iPads or their devices and get them into the garden, doing something purposeful. We work on knowledge and skills transfer. Today, many of us have forgotten simple tasks such as using a chanko to build a raised bed for growing vegetables. So all these skills has been retaught again. Of course, the kids and the adolescents, the work that we do with them of imparting the seed to harvest process has been very rewarding for us as well. So over the last 10 years, we have built 280 of these gardens all around Singapore, big, small, in people's homes, on top of malls. And we have a combined food production space of 32,000 square feet. And we have engaged close to 262 schools and organizations on educational programs around food. So I wanted to quickly share this example that we did. This must be 4 to 5 years back, and it was a collaboration with the Ministry of National Development on a experiment to really design and operate a community-centric urban farm that achieves social impact, environmental impact, and also community engagement. And it's really to look into alternative food systems, especially for the city. And one of the major elements that we wanted to tackle was food waste. And one of the ways that we did it was to start one of the first black soldier fly farm with our partners in sector to really look at how we could compost food waste into high value organic fertilizer that can be fed in back to our growing systems. But we are also not, we're also very exploring of various systems as well. So we have container farming systems, we had aquaponic systems, and really different merits of systems. Is almost like an agriculture amusement park, right, where people can come and see and experience and touch and feel, or participate as well. And this is to give people a diverse insight into different ways that we can produce food. And off the farm, we produce today a whole range of different microgreens, edible flowers, and native food products. And these are some of the products that we grow that are supplied to close to 100 restaurants in Singapore today. And we also have a community-supported agriculture box scheme that is delivered on a weekly basis to households. But at the core of the experiment was the community and the people that made the farm a possibility. So the number of volunteers that we have facilitated through the site, the number of programs and community engagement programs that we have run on the farm in the last 4 to 5 years has really allowed us to spread the message of growing your own food to the general public. So just wanted to go in a little bit of what we're working towards for the future. And this notion of using urban farms as a place of care. I think with the work that we have been doing together with the support of NParks and NUS, we have found the value of horticulture therapy as a way to reduce propensity to fall ill, especially in the elderly population. And we hope that these urban farms could become a place of care for the community in the future. We want to accelerate the ability for urban farms to create equitable food systems through social employment. And today we are still actively hiring 10 adults with autism and will be growing that much larger into the future. But the farm has brought out a lot more intrinsic values for especially in the realm of the elderly. And we have worked closely with the Queenstown community, the Lions Befriender as well, to bring socially isolated elderly into the farm. And this example that I am showing you here, the picture, we had a tour for a group of elderly from Queenstown, and I was showing this gentleman, Mr. Lim, the plants in the planters, explaining to him, the different plants, and I thought I was showing him, and educating him, but in the end, he actually educated me a lot more because he was pointing to all the different plants that were growing, not in the planters, but around the planters, the weeds. And he opined the uses of these herbs for various medicinal uses. And further probing, I realized that he, in his youth, when he lived in Queenstown, he was a medicine picker. He will go around harvesting these weeds and selling it to the Chinese medicinal hall. I spent 2 hours sitting down, chatting with him. And through that conversation, I realized that there was a sense of sudden empowerment that I felt that he could be able to contribute knowledge back to the next generation of people. And this intergenerational bonding element has been really, really powerful in the role urban farm plays for the future. we are looking at broader ways of how we ensure a more equitable food system. We have started multiple projects working with foreign migrant workers and around food systems and food poverty. So starting edible gardens and gardens in the dormitories, for example. We recently ran a project with the Rotary Club of Singapore to further address food insecurity issues with the migrant workers. If you see this plant that is being carried by these volunteers that have been participating in the workshop, they are growing the moringa tree. And the moringa tree is one of the tree, it's called a horseradish tree, and it produces leaf and foliage and a drumstick-like fruit that is, highly sought after by foreign migrant workers from Myanmar, Bangladesh, and India. Our hope is really to plant as many of these trees within the foreign migrant workers' dormitories so that they can have direct access to food when they need to. And we successfully launched the first phase of that, where a group of volunteers planted these trees from seed. And we went down to the Terusan Recreation Center. We did a mental health workshop with the foreign migrant workers, and we planted the trees and various herbal plants together with them. And in some ways, it's not the tree that matters. It seems that we have formed a friendship between the foreign migrant workers and Singaporean, and we hope to plant 10,000 of these friendships in the near future. Wanted to leave you with a final word from a Japanese agriculture philosopher, Masanobu Fukuoka, and he said the ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. I hope that really embodies what we do in urban agriculture. Thank you so much for your time and listening.
Bjorn, now may I please invite the rest of our panelists up to the front of the gallery, please. Please join me in welcoming Matthew Howe, founder of Grow Bricks, Charlotte May, nutritionist and presenter, Jack Yam, the Midnight Gardener, and Sharon Tay, and Parks Community and Bloom Ambassador. And the moderator for the session is CDL Chief Sustainability Officer, Esteran.
Hello, I'm back. Hi. Bjorn, really impressive story, not just growing green, but also growing friendship and growing for good and social causes and also well-being of people, right? We are already very inspired. And now I have 4 more friends here who have not just green fingers, but also a green heart also. And Charlotte, I think some of you recognize her, celebrity. And Matthew, who is actually the founder of Grow Bricks. And in fact, I have 2 units at the back there. You can take a look at that also. Every 2-3 weeks, we harvest some really lovely vegetable, kale and all that. And of course, we have Jack, who is actually a midnight gardener.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then Sharon, who is actually an ambassador of NPAC Community in Bloom. So thanks, Bjorn, and we understand how you started, your journey, and maybe I could, ask all these, passionate people here, what, drove you, and how were you inspired to start your own journey? Charlotte, would you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. So I've always been very fascinated by nature. I like to just observe nature, and I think it's very interesting how something as humble as a seed can grow to become an entire plant, a tree, and potentially food for us to eat. But also, as someone that cooks, I used to be very frustrated at the fact that every time I needed a herb, I had to run out to the market or the supermarket. And worse still, if you shop at the supermarket, you have to buy an entire bunch that you may not even finish up before, it turns bad. And food waste is something I'm also very passionate about, and I try to avoid that as much as I could. or as much as I can. So I decided to grow my own herbs. That's where I started. But I didn't want to start from a seed because I thought that was way too intimidating. And so I started regrowing what I already had. So I think a lot of you saw this throughout the lockdown. People started regrowing their spring onions. I did the same with celery, with bok choy. I even stuck a beetroot into water to see if it grew leaves. And then I got really fascinated by all of that. I felt more empowered, and that's when I started growing from seeds. And then last year, late last year, I met Matthew and Grow Bricks, and the rest was history. Now I don't even plant my garden anymore. I think when Matthew first came to my apartment, he would see me grow some vegetables, and now it's just barren land because I've got Grow Bricks at home, and I'm sure Matthew will share about that in a little bit. But yeah, it's been that's my journey so far.
Okay, wonderful. So now let's pass the mic to Matthew. Tell us a little bit. I know you were actually working in the corporate world before you switched to this indoor farming. So you want to tell us your story?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Esther. I think from an urban farming perspective, for everyone, it tends to start with one crop. For many people, that's tomatoes. With me, it was basil, and I needed a lot of basil because my two daughters liked eating green pasta. Green pasta requires a lot of basil, and I was getting that from the supermarket. It wasn't particularly fresh, wasn't particularly fragrant. I was just pretty pumped that my girls were eating green stuff. So the produce was coming from Malaysia. The supply from the supermarket started to become unreliable, so I started growing it on my balcony, firstly in soil with limited success, and then I started experimenting with soilless techniques. And as you can imagine, after a while I became quite good at growing basil, and I started to experiment with different crops. And I found the experience very fulfilling, interesting, taking a seed, watching it thrive, and then harvesting it and feeding my family. And I thought that I enjoyed it so much that I guess halfway through 2020, I decided to draw a line under a 15-year career in banking and financial markets and go on some kind of a journey to encourage, enthuse, empower, educate urban communities to do the same, to live more sustainable, self-sufficient and healthier lives. And since then it's been an interesting journey with a product and a service that we've brought to market that I'm sure I'll get the opportunity to talk a bit more about later.
Okay, wonderful. How about you, Jack? I think you must have a day job. That's why you only do farming in midnight. Yeah, tell us your story.
Okay, well, it started in 2012. My mother-in-law, she planted like randomly, cantaloupe seeds and bitter gourd seeds. So these plants actually grew, they flowered, but you don't get fruits, right? So then being the son-in-law, I have to do my part, right? I need to do my homework to impress. So I had to go online, search for answers, but a lot of the answers, relate to the temperate countries, not the tropical countries. We want something that is localized, knowledge that is localized. So the search turned to the internet. I looked up Facebook groups, local websites, if there were any, and I joined some of these groups, and I benefited from the sharing of the members there. And interestingly, at the same point in time, I was growing rosemary really well. And people were skeptical. It was like, hey, no, you can't grow rosemary in Singapore. It's just not possible. And I shared to them, I did. And it's growing really well. I can even propagate them in water and grow more. So I documented my stuff, the steps, how to go about it. And I shared it freely with the community. And people tried. And it actually worked. But of course, there were some people who didn't get the results that was intended, but it actually worked. Some people actually had success. So I thought, hey, that's great. That's one way I can give back to the community, And yeah, that's how it started. The exchange of ideas with fellow, people, urban farmers who share the same vision. yeah, just sharing ideas and giving back to the community. That made it very enriching lah.
Wonderful. Grow a good relationship with your mother-in-law, very important. Yeah. And then now, Sharon, how about you? You know, how did you become the NParks Community in Bloom ambassador? Sounds really big. How do you become an ambassador?
One of the few. Yeah. Thanks, Esther, for having us. Yeah. So actually, for me, it all started when I've always dabbled in gardening on my own. Started with sprouts. Had a few sprouting trays in the kitchen. Some made it to the dining table. Some didn't. Some died. But it was in 2016 when I took 2 trips that literally changed the course of my life. I went on to a place in the U.S. I went to a friend's place. We had a gathering. It was in Wisconsin. We all gathered in a friend's home, and it was at the table where I was served this loaf of bread. It was called Ezekiel sprouted bread. And it was the first time in my life where I actually had sprouted grain bread. Right? I mean, I had sprouts. I have had the toh miaos, right? But never have I ever had sprouts in bread, right? So then that got me thinking about nutrient density. Like, it got me really, really intrigued. I was thinking, what is the quality of the food that we have back home? What is this kind of sprouted bread? Do we have this at home? Can we make this at home? And then later on in the year, I took another trip to New Zealand. I went to an area in Christchurch, and we stayed with a couple, a very young couple, who actually owned a very small piece of property. But on that piece of land, just the 2 of them in their 30s, they were able to raise 80% of their food, right? And they actually, short of salt and a few other, grocery items like maybe your toilet paper, right? They basically were quite self-sufficient. So if an earthquake were to hit them, they were actually quite good on their own. So that got me really, really inspired. I was thinking, a young couple, small piece of land, they could grow their own food, right? So my husband and I went back from the trip. We came back to Singapore. At that time, we were moving into our first home together. We were moving into a new estate in Punggol, right? And then we got thinking, what if we could, bring some of these experiences back home? It got me really thinking about nutrient density, the quality of the food we were having. Got me thinking about, our skill sets, right? Because what happens if our food supply were to be disrupted? What would we be doing, right? So then we thought, okay, what better way than to try to experiment with gardening back home, right, in our new place? And obviously, as much as we would love to have cows and chickens, but obviously we couldn't do that, right, and not in a HDB estate. And also, we didn't want fruit trees to be cracking our neighbors' ceilings, right? So the next sensible option was really to do edible gardening, and that's how we got started. And when we set out, we actually had 2 objectives. The first one was really to help our fellow neighbors develop some food growing skills as well, right? Because in Singapore, I think we are used to buying things off the supermarket shelves, as Charlotte was just talking about, but we're not so used to seeing it come off the ground, right? So the first intention was really, how can we have a space like that where people can learn and experiment and develop their food growing skills. But secondarily, we wanted to be able to share the harvest with our families in need in the area, right? So we started doing that, and that's how we got going. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So how did you, link up with NPark? I'm sure you used some of the garden space, is it?
Yeah. Not so much that space, but we were definitely greatly supported by NParks, right? They came on board, they helped us to look at the space that we had. So they helped us with the planning of the space, right? Just so that we could maximize the yield and also encourage participation by the larger community. Yeah, so they support us greatly in that, from that angle. Yeah.
Sounds really good, and all these are like positive story, but I'm sure there were also challenges, right, along the way. Maybe I would like to go back to beyond that, your 10 years anniversary of the business. Really, congratulations. But I'm sure along the way you would also have some setback here and there, and maybe you want to share some of them, and how did you overcome it?
Thanks, Esther, and hi everyone, panelists. Sorry I can't be there with you. Well, there's so many challenges. I don't know where to start, Esther. But I think from a growing perspective, of course, my excitement coming back to Singapore was to adapt a lot of the crops or vegetables that I have experienced in the temperate climate, and trying to manipulate the environment here so that I could grow them here with some success, but not too much success. And it's only over time and after a lot of observations that I realized that perhaps it is better to look at varieties and plants and native vegetables that thrive in our tropical climate, that have the same kind of flavor profiles as those temperate equivalent. So that has really changed the way we have grown a lot of the crops on our farm, and a lot of the edible flowers that we grow today are a huge amount of them are native plants of Singapore and the Southeast Asia region. And we introduced that into the F&B market and the restaurants, and also households as well. So there's a whole big space, I feel, for native food to really shine, for indigenous and native food to really shine for the future. And these are probably learnings and mistakes that I made in the earlier parts of my journey.
You need to persevere, right? Hey, Matthew, let me come back to you. I know you started with very good intention to grow basil for your daughters, but was your wife, worried? It's like, oh my God, my husband is going to quit the banking job and grow vegetable, So how was it like, the experience? Was it challenging? Was it scary? And, were you worried about income, to pay bills and all that? Yeah.
Well, my wife is also a banker, so it wasn't a big problem.
Okay.
No, so I started growing food at home, and like all the other panelists have mentioned, there are considerable difficulties associated with growing something like this here in Singapore. It's lettuce. So I started to look for ways to grow food indoors in my home, and I wanted to try and merge the ideas of furniture with farming. I thought if I could design something that looked nice, then maybe people would want to do it in their home, and in doing so, you can escape some of the environmental constraints that the other panelists have been talking about. And I started doing it for my home, and once I got a prototype together, I managed to raise money and get the product manufactured, and that's one of the earlier versions over there. I soon realized that there might actually be companies that might be interested in doing this as well. And now we offer this farming as a service, where I suppose the concept is fairly unique and fresh. We're farmers. We just do the farming at your place rather than ours. Kind of similar to what edible gardens do, but we focus on indoors. And like I said, because the product that we designed is a wall feature, so we tried to sort of blend the aesthetics of a green wall. So green walls are very, very common and very popular here in Singapore. People like to have them because they look nice. They like to be around green things. Can we blend the aesthetic qualities of a green wall with the functionalities of modern controlled environment agriculture? And if we made something that looked nice, then maybe different parts of the community would be interested in doing it. Shopping malls, corporate offices, retirement homes, schools, restaurants, bars. And in doing so, I think we're trying to expose urban farming to larger parts of the community. And I think one of the struggles that we're facing at the moment is explaining this concept to people, that if you have an empty wall and a PowerPoint, we can come and build a productive farm at your location, and we'll come every week and basically just look after it for you and make it work. So explaining the concept of what we do, because it's quite new and unique, has been something of a challenge. Most offices or workplaces don't quite understand why they would want to grow lettuce on their wall. But the reason why they would want to do it is very similar to everything that Bjorn has explained with regards to community, particularly with people coming back to the workplace after 2 years working from home in their pajamas. Employers have been very keen to provide interesting, immersive experiences to entice their employees back to the office. And we think a great way to for employers to do this is to provide something that's good for the environment, good to showcase Singapore's food security issues whilst providing community and education for people.
Sounds really good, bonding and education and fun as well, right? And in fact, seems like there are a lot of benefits by doing all this, like, farming at home or, at leisure. Charlotte, you are very into nutrition and even composting and all that. Maybe you can share with us, how you turn all this green hobby into something that it is benefiting your wellness and, bonding as well?
Yeah, so I started using grow bricks from, I think, October last year. I got to know about them and got it installed in my apartment. And we went from a household that used to buy about 3 to 5 bags of salad a week to buying nothing at all since. In my household, we tend to eat a lot of salads just because it's easy to put together. So it's a huge deal for us. So I've been really enjoying that so far. And as a nutritionist, that's very important to me, to be able to eat the most nutrient-dense foods as possible, very similarly to what Sharon mentioned earlier. And to be able to eat the food that you've just harvested yourself, you're getting the most nutrients possible, because when food gets transported from one place to another, there is what is called post-harvest nutrient loss. The minute something is picked, it's losing nutrients, it's losing its vitamins and minerals. Here in Singapore, because 90% of our food gets imported, that means that it's traveling in trucks and planes and ships, and then into the supermarket, onto the supermarket shelves. And then how long are they on the shelves for? And when you buy it back home, how long are you keeping it in your crisper drawer? So a lot of nutrients can be lost there. And the beauty of being able to consume what you harvest at home is amazing. But obviously, that's not something that all of us can do. But it's just the idea of consuming locally, right? Supporting our local farmers. That's a huge part of that as well. And as someone that cares about the environment and is conscious of my of my carbon footprint, being able to grow your own, that drastically lowers your carbon footprint and reduces lots of waste as well, from in the sense of packaging. So yeah.
Also chemical fertilizer free as well, right?
Absolutely.
So, okay, let me turn back to Jack. Apart from having better relationship with your mother-in-law, you were talking about bonding with the community and all that. And I understand that you are also, teaching some of your friends, neighbors, and how big is your community now? I'm just curious.
Well, how big? Well, at least neighbors on several floors know me to be, hey, the guy, that guy grows his own vegetables along his corridor, And sometimes actually it's pretty interesting to see the elderly, they take a walk just outside my corridor just to check out whatever vegetables I'm growing. So yeah, I mean that's I would term it as my kampong lah, But on the greater scale, right? I see it as the urban farmers as a big community, as one, and that's where I freely share stuff that I do, tutorials that I put up, teaching people how to grow stuff, propagate stuff, to grow your own things, how to transplant seed plugs even, to big planters, how to go about growing leafy vegetables. So that's on the bigger scale where I try to do my outreach. But the immediate neighbors, I could see the benefits immediately taking place. When COVID hit us, a lot of us were working from home, right? And just to take a break from having to stare at the screen, we'll come out, stare at our greens, just poke the soil, touch the leaves, sayang a bit. But my neighbors caught on. They were like, hey, that's something that I could possibly do. And I said, yes, you can. It's easy. It's very easy. They were skeptical. So what I did was try to teach them what was really simple and basic. Let's try microgreens. Something like pea shoots. You just need 7 days. So from the day that you sow to the time that you harvest, you just need 7 days. and even your children can still, catch on and still keep their attention. So they tried and they were like, wow, hey, I could really grow something to eat. Some of them were like, hey, this is the first time I'm growing something to eat. No. So they were so excited. So that went from one neighbor to another neighbor. And now if you look at it, my kampong, if you check out my Facebook page, you see that my kampong has become more close-knit. And it's like what Bjorn said, right? It's a people thing, relationships. And I really, really agree with that, because it brought us closer together, not just on the topic of growing our own edibles, but rather it went beyond that. We were looking out for one another. There were elderly folks in our community, definitely. And my neighbors were starting to do what I do too, because I grow a whole lot of like pea shoots, and I share with the elderly, quite a few of them. And they, in turn, some of my neighbors grew leafy vegetables and shared it with their neighbors too. So that was really, really cool. Yeah.
Oh, sounds really fun. And you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I wish I was your neighbor, Jack. Like,
That's
vegetable exchange.
But that's what a lot of people actually put or commented in my posts. And what I wanted to do was actually encourage them and inspire them to actually do it in their own area, wherever they stayed, to start their own little kampongs, So we had like, if everybody like puts in their part to actually take that first step forward and to reach out, you actually have many, many small little kampongs happening in Singapore. And hey, that's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, sounds really good. So Sharon, how about your kampong? Has it been growing, and was it challenging? Was it difficult? Will you be under the sun and all that? I don't really have green fingers and always high in the room. But even during COVID, I actually dabble into planting some of the pandan leaf, super easy. So how was your experience like? Was it very some challenges, and also what exactly keep you going for so many years?
Yeah, challenges definitely. I think I've lost count of how many roadblocks I've hit along the way. But one thing that comes to my mind really is that when we were getting the space going, when we were first setting up, I had a resident. I think for us, because we are coming from a purely community-driven, community-led angle, whereby it's not for profit and it's really run by volunteers, led by volunteers. So really, I think one of the biggest stumbling block that I can recall is that we had a situation where we were trying to get, basically residents to buy into the concept for the space, right? Because we were converting the use of an existing area, right, and then converting that into an edible garden. And so it really, we surveyed the residents, we tried to, gather people's inputs and insights on that. And then there was a lady, I remember, she came, very angrily to the garden. And she walked really fast to the garden, and she looked me in the eye and said, I'm really very stressed looking at vegetables in the supermarket, right? Why do I have to come home and see more vegetables? And this is a true story. And she literally looked me in the eye and said that. And at that moment, I had to take a step back and think, is this really worth doing, right, what we're doing? Because we are fellow neighbors, right, and we have nothing to gain from it, apart from the fact that we really wanted to bring edible gardening to the estate, right? And she was, she said it with so much angst. And then I took a step back and thought about, the place she was coming from. It made me really feel like perhaps she's really under a lot of stress as it is, right? So I didn't want to take it personally, but I kept my vision at my forefront, right? At the end of the day, my objectives are very simple. I just really wanted to have a space where people can gather, right? Because moving into a new estate and having grown up in a mature estate, I miss the old kampong spirit that is very prevalent in our old estate, right? Where people will keep the doors open. I literally can smell my neighbor's curry down the corridor, right? But in a new estate, people keep their doors closed, right? So my one and only motivation is have a place where people can come together. Right, and even if it means the auntie will be stressed for a while, it's okay, right? We tried to, build goodwill with her over time. So whenever we had harvest, we would share. But because she's very stressed, right? So we just hung at the door initially, before we eventually approached with the vegetables. But it took us time, and I'm very happy to say that a year into the project, she's come around. In fact, she started bringing her friends to the garden. Yeah, so yeah, happy story, happy ending to the story.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Bjorn, I don't think you will ever feel stressed looking at green, right? Yeah. So, do you have any story to share that is like some challenges or some happy story? Yeah.
Actually, in the earlier days, when I started on my farming journey, um, when I see pests on my plants, I get very stressed um, because I feel like I failed. And that there was a problem. Um, I feel very irritated. I feel very stressed. But over time, being a little bit more understanding of balances in nature and the ecosystem, the pests will always be there somehow or another. So today, when I when I see a plant with pests, I'm not stressed anymore. I kind of a bit more zen dealing with it. So it's shown over time. Yeah, it's gardening and being outdoors and in nature and touching the soil. And again, like what Jack mentioned, touch here a bit, poke here a bit. It's very therapeutic for your mental wellness. And being able to engage with a living thing and see it grow and nurture it is like a little bit like nurturing yourself as well. So I encourage everyone to really pick this up as a hobby or as a business because it can be very, very good for your mental well-being.
Sounds great. Okay, I will ask one more question, and I will invite any question from the audience, and then make it more like a conversation. Okay, and Bjorn, I remember one of your slides shows some of the food waste issues in the world, and in fact, research showed that like 2.5 billion tons of produce that never really reached the table, and a lot of food actually lost in the transport and all that. So how do you think that growing your own edible greens at home or farm to table, let's call it, will help to reduce food waste as well? Because it's an irony, right? While there are a lot of people are going hungry, but there are so much food that is gone to waste. Yeah, can you share your thought, Bjorn? And then after that, we pass to Charlotte and the panelists here. Yeah.
Sure. I think the structure of food systems globally has always been a model around a very centralized approach where you have a consolidation of many small farms becoming a big corporate powerhouse farm. So the corporatization of food system actually caused a lot of this wastage through the supply chain. So in order for us to look at it from a different lens, a decentralized approach for the future could be the answer of reducing food waste. So for example, having smaller scale community-run farms that's part of the NParks, 1,000 community gardens, could produce food on demand for the community, reduce the miles that it takes or the loss that it takes to actually transport the food. And when there are any vegetable waste from the community, it can go back to the farm to be composted and then be used as fertilizer, thus closing the loop. So we need to relook at how food systems are designed and shift from a centralized production model to a decentralized one.
Sounds good. I think circularity is the way forward. And Charlotte, you gave a workshop for our staff last year during lockdown on composting. Yeah. Could you share the fun and joy of doing composting?
Oh, the fun and joy. No, I love composting. I think I've been doing it for about 2.5 years now. And it's interesting because a lot of people say, oh, it's so hard to compost in Singapore because we don't have gardens, etc. I chanced upon this, how would I call it? this item, I would say, and it's called the urban composter. And basically it allows you to compost in, in the city, in a city apartment. I live in a flat myself, and I have 2 of these bins, and it's just incredible to see circularity happen at your doorstep. I don't use it so much for leftovers because I love food too much to ever have leftovers. I just eat them all. But, fruit peels or vegetable, peels, anything like that goes in there. And then from that, I get a ferment. We call it a ferment tea, and I use that as fertilizer for my plants. And the pickle that I get in there, I, sandwich it between 2 layers of soil, and then that becomes compost for my plants. And it's incredible to see that the entire process happen. So yeah, it's composting may not be the most straightforward thing for everyone, but if you can get your hands on one of these compost bins, it's almost foolproof. Matt, you've also used one of them, haven't you?
Yep, I have one.
How's your experience like?
You have to wait a long time to get anything you can do anything with.
Yeah.
I'm not very patient.
Yeah, you do need a few weeks, yeah.
And also I don't farm with soil, so I don't have much purpose for it.
True. Well, that's
Pass it
where
to
your
your
neighbors.
neighbor.
Yeah.
Get them to grow stuff.
So what is your thought about circularity? You, yes.
I think it's something that we all need to embrace, living in urban environments. Where our food comes from and what we do with our waste. I think we only eat 50% of the produce that we grow here in Asia, and the 50% that we don't eat, it ends up in landfills where it rots and turns to methane, which is a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide. In fact, 10% of all greenhouse gases come from food waste. So circularity, sustainable food systems, and all things like this is something which interests me dearly, so much so that I've decided to dedicate the next 5-10 years of my life to working with these problems. So it's something that we should all be aware of.
That's wonderful. And you also save from packaging, right? Really farm to table, right? Jack, just pick from your corridor and then cook.
Yeah, that's right. So my wife goes, hey, I want to cook some nai pai today. Can you go harvest some? Sure. I'll just go get it. Yeah. So, yeah. But so on that note, right? Definitely having to have an urban farm just outside my corridor, it's really convenient. I just have to go out there, harvest the herbs or the vegetables that I need. But of course, what's important is I can just harvest what I need, not buy a whole pack of vegetables and hopefully, my family can finish all of it. If not, then we'll hope to keep it another day and cook it on another day. But really, I just need to just cut what I need and consume what I need. And yeah, as Charlotte mentioned, you cut away plastic packaging. You don't need to have plastic bag packing your vegetables, when you buy them from the supermarket. So that helps, keep the carbon emissions down. The other thing is, I try to tell people, some people approach me, they ask me, hey, I want to grow something to eat, what should I grow? So the first thing that I tell them is, grow something that you and your family would want to eat. Not just grow any vegetable that you come across or any seeds that you get. Grow something that you and your family would want to eat. Then there is that motivation to grow it, and you would want to really consume it. Yeah. So I think, and that would help in cutting down any waste that you grow stuff, and then if you don't consume it, then that's really wasted. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Sharon, how about your experience? And in your community, do you see a certain profile, only retirees are interested, or even younger kids are interested in farming?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I just want to jump in and say I do have a cultivator in my kitchen as well. So harvesting what you need, but growing what you need as well. So for me, it's really quite exciting when, I can kind of plan my vegetable, like what I hope to have in the next couple of weeks. I plan that out, right, and then grow what we need, and then harvest that for dinner that night. So it's just a few steps away. That's really fun. Yeah, but definitely, I think when it comes to circularity, I think there are a few things that come to mind. The first one is in that I feel like a lot of us maybe tend to waste our food, and I myself guilty of this, guilty as charged. We tend to waste food if we don't really appreciate it as much, like if we don't really know the hard work that has gone into it. I mean, I myself, I'm guilty of killing many plants before, and I've wasted vegetables before. But the thing is, once I started growing my own vegetables and I realized the sheer hard work that goes into producing your own vegetables, then it really made me appreciate the produce so much more. And it also made me appreciate the people that grow them, the people who pack them, the people who drive the trucks that bring them to our supermarket, even the supermarket auntie who packs it in the shelves. It really made me appreciate it so much more. And I think when you talk about circularity, that appreciation starts with us getting our hands involved, right? If we are so disconnected from that picture, we only see that bag of vegetable, just like kids see chicken fillets in the supermarket without seeing the whole chicken. They think chicken grows in supermarkets. You know, that disconnect is what can really impact, you know, our treatment of that particular dish, right? How well we regard it, how well we appreciate it, and how well we use it. In our garden, I think we see a lot of both the young and old, but we also see like parents bring their kids as well. I've spoken to many young parents because Punggol is quite a young estate, right? And we have a lot of young couples with young kids, and they tell us that actually they themselves, they feel really bad that they have not had that experience before, but they are really trying to take a proactive step forward in trying to give their children that experience that they never did have themselves, right? So, you know, often we find kids that play in the garden. They play in the garden, right? We started our gardens quite a few years back, right? Some of them were only like 2 or 3 when they started getting their hands into the dirt, and then now they're like in primary school and all that, right? So they literally grew up in the garden, and it's very fulfilling to see that, because I think for us as a community-driven initiative, we really just want to you know, inspire the next generation, and it all starts off with them getting their hands in the soil. And I've lost count of how many parents that have come to me to say that, you know, my kid has never eaten vegetable up until the time they planted their own, and that really is what keeps us going. And I think that's really true circularity to me. Yeah.
Sounds really good. So we have about 10 minutes more. We can take a few questions. Any first questions from the audience? Or just share your experience, you know, okay, this lady here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I couldn't see, the light is too bright. Yeah, this lady I can see, yeah. Then the second one, is it there? I can't see. Rina, help me. Yeah.
Hi, this is Yvonne. I think it's really nice to bring all the like-minded people together. I'm also a person passionate about agriculture on crops. I think everyone has the responsibility and also the ability to influence growing crops. Even myself, working in a corporate company, I'm not a banker, but I also have the ability to influence providing the agri-solutions to my value chain partners, bring the farmers together. I also work with the SFA, local farmers, to really plant some projects. And I really appreciate that the freshness of the local vegetables. I started from seedlings, transferring to the full mature crops. And I ate it, you know, on the same day itself when it matured. It's really fresh and crunchy. So do support local. But I think the challenge for me is to really find out, does it really make a business case in Singapore, right? Growing our own vegetables. We're a small country. We really work a lot with the trading partners. Is it really sustainable in the long term? I often have this question, you know, troubling myself, that is it really the long term that a model that we want to go, you know, with all these trading partners that we have for many years. So that's also a question that we can also, you know, discuss with the panel here. Lastly, on a lighter note, so Jack, why are you called the midnight gardener or grower? This is not answered yet. Thanks.
Okay, Jack, go to
$1
you
million
first.
question.
Yeah. Then we ask the businessman.
Okay.
Is it viable? Is it sustainable? You know, yeah, farming in Singapore. Yeah.
Okay, why am I known as the Midnight Gardener? Okay, because I've got 3 kids, all right? Well, 2 of them are teens now, so one's still young. But because in the earlier days when I did my gardening, I would have to wait for the kids to, like, you know, we want to spend time with the kids as much as we can. But we also want to do our own thing. So by the time the kids go to bed, you know, and you have the golden hour, that's like close to midnight, lah. You know, so that's when I do my gardening. So I'm like tilling my soil, transplanting seedlings and stuff. Then my wife go, "Wow, you're a midnight gardener, huh?" You know, it's like doing stuff in the night. So that caught on, yeah, and that's why I'm known as the midnight gardener. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and he has a lot of followers on Facebook and all that. You can, just connect. Yeah. Okay, Bjorn, you have done this for 10 years. I'm sure you find ways to sustain the business, right? Now maybe you can answer this question from Shibon, right? Yeah. Bjorn?
Yes, sure. It is definitely a challenging industry, agriculture, especially if you put it in a context of urban space. Many agribusinesses are based on economies of scale model. So the bigger the farm, the more they produce, the lower the price comes, the more competitive their products can become. Of course, then for the urban spaces, space is of a limitation. Though you have seen in the recent years, a lot of vertical farms have come about, but these cost a lot of money to build. The infrastructure cost is really high. And coupled with short land tenure terms of not more than 20 years in Singapore for farms in Kranji, it is very hard to justify business models growing staple vegetables like bok choy, chai sim, kangkong, when import prices are a lot lower. So it's still a challenge. We need to kind of work towards a balance where support is given to local farms to produce these staples, so that we have at least an underlying resilient food security blanket. And of course, the community has a big part to play as well. If everyone participated in some form of growing or agriculture, we could potentially make a more decent dent on towards the 30 by 30 goal that we are trying to achieve.
Yeah, thank you. Matthew, you are rather new in this agribusiness. Have you found a sustainable business model, or is still evolving?
Sure. I mean, as Bjorn said, growing vegetables and then selling them at market is an incredibly difficult business here in Singapore for a number of reasons. There's a lot of cheap stuff coming over the border from Malaysia. There's cheap stuff coming in from China, and a big part of the price is electricity. And as we know, that's gone up quite a bit over the past few months. So it's only going to get more difficult. So is it a good business? I think it's a very difficult one. It's not really what we do at GrowBricks. We basically sell experience and lifestyle, which I think is also quite similar to what Bjorn does, in that we're selling an education and an experience. And just part of that is, yes, we're growing food. So it's different what we do. As for solving Singapore's food security issues through sustainable, viable business, I think it's going to be very difficult. Someone's going to have to pick up the bill. It's either going to be the consumer that needs to adjust their expectations on what they want to pay for leafy greens, or the government's going to have to subsidize it, one or the other. At the moment, we only get 13% of our greens from Singapore. If we want to push that to 30, growing it's not going to be a problem, but getting people to buy it, that's going to be more of an issue. And that's what it's going to take 8 years, I think, for consumer spending habits to change, so that when you walk into a supermarket and you've got the $150 a bag from Malaysia or China, or you can have the $3 or $4 bag that was grown in a farm here in Singapore, until more people start opting for the $3 or $4 bag, then Singapore's really going to struggle to become more food secure. And what we're doing at GrowBricks, yes, we recognize that putting nice decorative walls that grow food in corporate offices and shopping malls isn't going to fix the problem. What we're looking to do is to promote this idea of locally grown produce so that people can become closer to it. And, hopefully after this, we can all go and eat off the wall and sort of experience the difference in quality in having produce to eat, which you literally just harvested a matter of seconds or minutes ago.
Great. There's another in the audience. Want to ask a question, right? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Aries. I just needed to ask two questions. One is, because everybody here has experience in growing vegetables at home, how many vegetables and how long does it take to realistically sustain a household of one couple and two children? That's the first question, okay? Second is, I'm a private chef specialized in special diets, and there's a lot of food wastage. Every single day, I throw at least 2 kilos of food, okay? And I want to know, is there anyone in the panel that actually has a station to receive compost from organizations in Singapore? Because not everybody does farming. And even among urban farming, there is the hydroponic section and there is the soil section. And only the soil uses compost. So for businesses like mine, I want to play a part. I don't have space to grow vegetables, and even if I do, I would more likely to opt for the hydroponics section. So is there anything I can do about my wastage?
Wow. You are a pro. Next time we should have you on the panel. So everyone on the panel want to ask answer these two challenging questions.
I just have a question for her though about the wastage. What exactly goes into your wastage currently?
Okay, so the ends of the kailan that people don't eat and it's inedible for humans, because the fiber is just too tough. Roots, peels, I mean, a lot of them we can make it as soup broth and stuff, but it is inevitable to have a lot of waste, like rotten leaves. We also have meat wastage. We also have bone wastage. All this can be used to make very good fertilizer. I cracked at least 30 eggs to 60 eggs a day. While I was waiting here, actually, I took a nap because I'm just so tired from work this morning. So these are actual food wastage, and they all go to the bin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's no way I can save it. And every single day, this is happening in my kitchen. So if there's a solution where I can actually collect all this and send it somewhere where it goes to somewhere to do something, that would be great, right? Yeah. So I was just wondering, does Edible Garden has a station where businesses like mine can, hey, you need compost? I can give you compost. You just have to take it, you know?
Yes. Bjorn, will you consider this as a service?
So we used to allow people to come onto the farm. We have a composting area where they can then discard food waste into the compost bin. And then these are big compost, 1 cubic meter type composting systems. However, we had to stop doing so because it comes down to then a little bit of hard to manage when people start throwing all kinds of funny things inside. So we stopped that for the time being. But it's probably a good time, a right time now in Singapore for someone to start a business around compost and collection of food waste. And making compost and returning back to households so that they can use that to garden. There are similar social enterprises and enterprises in the US, in Europe, where they do provide this service of collecting food waste and then returning the subscribers a bag of compost every month. So high time, maybe Singapore needs a social enterprise in that space.
Sounds really interesting. Liz, you have a question or a comment? Yeah? Yeah, we'll pass you the mic.
Thank you, Liz Courtney, and I'm involved with work at NTU. I just wanted to add to the food wastage, which is that there is a project happening at NTU at the moment where they're taking as a trial program all food scraps from fruits and vegetables, and they're looking at turning that, what we would call waste, into a resource, and they're turning it into a new type of food-made plastic. And it's a trial program going on at the moment to see how Singapore can take its food scraps from edible greens and fruit and turn it into a new product.
Sounds good. Anyone who want to address the question of composting?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because the reason I ask about the type of food scraps you have is that really depending on where your kitchen is sited, whether it's a home kitchen or whether it's a commercial kitchen, different solutions may be available to you. I was just thinking about, I think Charlotte earlier mentioned about the composting bin, right? If it's a home situation, that might be something worth considering, or like a bokashi kind of, composting solution. In our community outreach efforts, we have also engaged some of those fruit stalls around our community, around our precinct, whereby they have like vegetable peels, fruit peels and things like that they actually have to clear and dispose of, but they don't have a solution. So we actually go and collect from them, right? So if you're able to touch base with, I think, community gardens around the different the locations that you are in, I think you'll find that there will be a lot of takers for that, depending on what you have. Yeah, so those solutions are available.
Wonderful. I think we have. Oh, sorry, Jack. Here.
Your eggshells can go in there too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I saw one hand here. Is it you want? We can only take one more question, and then we can wrap up with one last round. Of the panelists' wish. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just make a comment. I'm from Jurong Lake Gardens. I'm Wilson from the National Parks Board. So to address what happens with regards to food waste, right? Just to share with you our example is that we worked with what we call an interest group, Project Black Gold. Some of you probably have heard of them. So what happens is that they worked with us in our allotment gardens, where we gave them a composting corner, where the allotment gardeners as well as people around the community come in to kind of like contribute their food waste, come together. So we have a composting Saturday, whereby they bring in their food waste, and me being a great horticulture waste producer, I have dried leaves, your grass clippings and all that. So we put together and they make good compost, and after that they can actually put it back into their allotment plots and use it. So I suggest that for those of you, if you have a lot of food waste and all that, you can actually work with your community gardens, right? Create a little corner, get the community together to make your own compost. So you reduce all that mouse and all that carbon that you're going to burn to bring all that waste to a centralized place to do it. So that is one way to do so. And then you can educate and get your community involved. So right at your doorstep, like what Jack has mentioned, right? Of course, when we do composting, we put in raw stuff, not cooked stuff. You don't throw in your curry chicken and all that. It's not going to, your plants are not going to grow with all that oil and the salt that's in there. Yeah, thank you.
Sounds really good, and I'm sure Ariel, right? You can connect and then get the which community garden you can actually deposit all your food, your waste there. And okay, so now we are coming to the end already. I just want to have one lightning round among all the panelists. That if I were to start now, as like just anybody wants to start growing edible green anywhere creatively, what will be the one tips that you can share? Maybe we start with Charlotte first. Yeah.
The one tip for growing. So just expanding on what Jack said earlier, I think for people who, just want to start out small and feel a little bit of empowerment, you can start from sprouts. I even tried sprouting chia seeds. And also as a nutritionist, I can tell you that with micro sprouts like that, you're getting a lot of nutrition in a very small amount of food. So that's somewhere you can start.
Wonderful. Matthew?
Yeah, you can just go to the, it's quite simple to germinate a seed, and then just start very basic and then see if it's for you. It doesn't take a big setup to get started. So it's just about getting out and choose a crop that you want to eat.
Wonderful. Jack?
Well, start simple. Don't start with complicated crops. So microgreens, definitely, that's the way to go, because easily achieved in like 7 days, I get something to eat. So start with something simple. When you achieve that, then you find, hey, I got something that I can eat. Then go explore something more complicated. And if that fails, you still can fall back on what you did well, which was microgreens, and then try again in the future.
Well, Sharon?
I think since they touch on plants, I'll touch on something else. Use what you have. Yeah, I think when you're just starting out, don't have to get too overwhelmed. Don't have to worry about getting the right trays, the right containers. Just use what you have, right? Grab a buddy, grab someone to do it with you. Sometimes it can feel very intimidating, right? Just getting your first plant up. But what's the worst thing that can happen really? At the end of the day is if the plant dies, then you just compost it and then you try again, right? So don't be afraid to try. Grab a friend or just if you want to do it alone, just use what you have. Yeah, and start from there.
Sounds good. Bjorn, how about you? Any tips that, can help us one day become a successful agri-enterprise like you?
Don't give up, right? I used to kill a lot of plants in my early days. Now I kill less plants, but I still do kill plants, and if all else fails, look for Dr. Wilson Wong, because then he's the guru. He will give you all the tips and on how to keep your plants alive. So now that I know that he's there, go look for him after this panel to ask him questions.
Can I actually add one more thing? Matt mentioned starting from a seed. I used to get really afraid by that because sometimes you get seeds that are expired and you can't even test them prior. So I'm also keen to hear what the farmers have to say about this. But propagate. I always had a lot of fun propagating. I would actually buy some basil at the supermarket, and then I would snip them into little bits, stick them into the many jars I've collected at home, and you see roots grow. It's so encouraging, and I stick that in soil, and you get new plants. So there you go. Buy one, get 10 free.
Well, sounds really good. And after this session, I think all of us are very inspired. And if we can all try to grow our edible green, I think we will be very hopeful to help Singapore to achieve 30 by 30. And we have many, many, many kampong, right? Not just Jack's kampong. And with this, thank you very much. And I hope you all enjoy, farming at home.